Okay, so I tweeted earlier today asking what I should do a video about, and the only person who responded, I think his name is Hugh Mercer. His Twitter handle is Horn Supremacy or something. Asked me to do a video about Scottish history. Now I don't know how I would be able to do a video on Scottish history, given my limited knowledge of that subject, but well, one thing I did do was just Google Scottish history shapefile. And I did actually find a pretty interesting data set that I'm going to share with you. Anyway, I typed in Scottish history shapefile and went straight to the first result, Historic Environment Scotland. They actually have a pretty nice spatial downloads page. So this stuff looked kind of boring, to be honest. But land use is something that's really interesting to me just because it's always such an intricate data set. Yeah, so here I've loaded it up. Let me just zoom out real quick. So there's Scotland in all its glory. It takes a while to render just because it's so detailed. This is Edinburgh, I believe. Yeah. And so this is just a cool little data set that has a bunch of, there's just a lot of different fields that they have. Honestly, I don't fully understand what all these mean. The one that makes the most sense to me is historic L, which I'm guessing is historic land use or something. So built up area, agriculture, rural settlement, whatever. So just this kind of on its own looks pretty cool. You can clearly see the light blue built up area of Edinburgh and the surrounding cities. Um, there's Glasgow. You get rid of the outlines. There we go. That makes it look nice. And so one cool thing that you can do, at least if I understand this data field correctly, is you go to period here. See, and it actually shows the period during which I can't tell if it's the period during which the buildings were built in that area or something else, because here, first of all, let's fix this. We have to move medieval all the way up here. And then medieval, post-medieval. Okay, and then recolor everything. There's Edinburgh again. So you can see that actually the way I colored it, the darker it is, the more recent the land use. So these motorways were all built, in the around the 21st century. This area is marked as what I think 16th century or 17th century, and then there's medieval. A couple medieval areas. They're very small. Here, here, and here. So there are some medieval buildings. This white spot, I believe, is just an absence of data. I'm not sure what that is. But at the same time, I don't really understand how this works because this is all moorland, these dark areas, and yet for some reason it's marked as late 20th century to present, which doesn't really make sense to me because it seems like those are the areas that would be least disturbed. So yeah, I'm not too sure about this data set. I've looked all around for documentation and I couldn't find anything. But there's a lot in there, and another field here, type, literally hundreds of different designations. If we switch to a random color map and apply that. I mean, I just love intricate data sets like this where you can, especially vector ones where you can zoom all the way in. This is just fascinating to me. But unfortunately, it's not too useful because the documentation is lacking. If anyone can find that, please let me know. But one thing I want to do with this video, in the last video I showed you how to make an extremely popular common type of map, the so-called roads only map, or nothing but the roads, right? I think I'll take the time in this video to show you how to make another popular fad map that I've seen, which is the no one lives here map. There's a couple ways to do this, and actually this land use data set gives us a pretty good way of doing it. This is the first way. So we go back to Historic L, which has 12 categories, right? Pretty much all we have to do is deselect. Actually, there's a better way to do this. Single symbol, right? And then you go over here to general. For some reason in QGIS this is in general. Feature filter, and just do historic land use not equal to built up area and historic land use not equal to rural settlement. Hit OK. OK again. So what you see here, unfortunately in a very small format, is everything in yellow is basically where nobody in Scotland lives, which is pretty crazy. Um, Although it's not that crazy if you think about it, because people tend to live close together in cities, so you can clearly see the cities here. But the rest of it is just farmland or just wilderness, so on. All I did was I just did a land use map, filtered out the built up areas. Now we can post this online and say, "Oh my God, 99% of Scotland, no one lives here." Whoa, which is, but if you really think about it, it's kind of common sense. Um, Especially when the data is so detailed, where you can pick out individual blocks and individual buildings. I mean, so this is one way to do it. But the criticism of doing it this way is that technically people do live in some of these blocks, 0.5% of Scotland's population, if I'm not mistaken. But people do actually live in this yellow area, just because this land use thing is sort of just an approximation. It's not exactly. So a lot of rural farmhouses and stuff are still, are still included in this yellow area. So it's not 100% correct. So the other way to do this would be to load up a census data set, and we open up the attribute table, sort by pop count. You can see that this is the way the UK census was designed. They don't have any units with 0 people. Unlike the US and Canada, Scotland seems to not have that. So as I was saying, the second method of selecting census blocks with 0 population doesn't work for Scotland, but it does work for Canada. So what I have here is I've loaded up a file that contains literally every single census block in Canada, and it's quite amazing actually. I'm just gonna zoom into downtown Toronto here. It's every single block here, and they call them dissemination blocks in Canada, I believe. In order to get our no one lives here map, we just go in like I did before, create a query, and you'll see here that I actually had to add the population data separately. I'm not going to get into exactly how I did that. If you guys are interested, if somebody sends me a message somehow saying I want to know how to do this, I can show you how to do this. But for now, let's just say that we have our population data for each block, and we're just going to say population is less than 1. And we're not going to say equal to 0, because the way the data is actually stored, I don't think there are 0 values in there. I think they're represented as -1 or period or something like that. So we're just going to say population less than 1. Hit OK. So even you can see that even in downtown Toronto, there's blocks where nobody lives, and I think this is the financial district here, which makes sense why there's no people there, at least living permanently. If we start to zoom out, we see parks opening up, but for the most part, southern Ontario is pretty densely settled. But once we zoom out and load all of Canada, we can see that there's huge areas which have 0 population. And even amongst the areas which are fairly settled, you can see that there's a lot of empty dissemination blocks or census blocks here. And so again, you can just take this result that we have here, export it, post it online, get a bunch of karma on Reddit saying, "Oh, no one lives in Canada, blah blah," and this is how you do it. Um, so again, if you guys want to know the exact procedure of how I took the population data and joined it with these census blocks, I can do that in a separate video. But for now, I just want to share the general idea of how this is done. And of course, you can do this for whatever country for which there is data. Australia, United States, most Western countries, it's fair game. So you guys can go ahead and try it.